All right, let's dive into one of the most complex and critical geopolitical situations of our time, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. To really get a handle on it, we've got to go back to the beginning, to look at the history and the key drivers that really set this crisis in motion. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the massive turning point in 2014. Then, we'll see how all that political tension just exploded into actual war. After that, we'll zoom out to see how the rest of the world got dragged in and had to pick sides. And finally, we'll look at the really difficult, ongoing search for some kind of peace. Okay, so where does the modern version of this conflict really kick off? You have to go back to the Ukrainian Revolution in 2014. I mean, this was the moment that truly put the nation at a huge crossroads with two completely different futures ahead of it. And man, when things started moving in 2014, they moved fast. It all started with the Euromaidan Revolution, these huge protests that ended up forcing the pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, out of power. By the end of that same year, Ukraine had made a massive pivot. It was signaling loud and clear that it wanted to align with Europe. And that single decision, well, it would have massive, massive consequences. And this is what it all boils down to, right? This is the core tension of the entire conflict. On one side, you've got the will of the people from the revolution, pushing the country towards the West. But on the other side, you've got Russia's incredibly powerful, long-standing strategic goal of keeping Ukraine in its orbit. This fundamental clash of visions, it became the engine for literally everything that happened next. You know, a political tug-of-war this intense was never going to stay just political. So let's look at how it went from a political shift to open warfare. Because the reaction wasn't a slow burn. It was immediate and it was forceful. The first huge military event was Russia's annexation of the Crimean Peninsula. Now, this was no coincidence. It was a direct and immediate answer to that pro-Western turn in Kyiv, and it sent absolute shockwaves around the world. And let's be super clear about what annexation really means. We're not talking about a simple border dispute here. This is the forcible takeaway of another country's land. That one action completely upended the international rules that had been more or less in place since the Cold War ended. After Crimea, the fire didn't just stop. It spread, like wildfire, into Ukraine's eastern industrial heartland, the Donbas region. There, pro-Russian separatists, with Russia's backing, started a war with Ukrainian forces. They even created their own breakaway republics. And the result was just a devastating humanitarian crisis, with millions of ordinary people caught right in the middle. There's a line from the source material that just nails the situation. The stakes are high and the sides are deeply entrenched. This really drives home that this wasn't some minor border skirmish. It had become a brutal, grinding war where neither side felt like they could possibly back down. Now, a fight on this scale was never going to stay local for long. The international community couldn't ignore it. They were forced to react, and soon enough, the whole world started taking sides. And the global response was, well, it was all over the map. As you can see, sure, about half the world came out with strong condemnations of what Russia did, but it was still really divided. You had about a fifth of nations offering direct support to one side or the other, and then the biggest concrete action, about a third of the response, came in the form of economic sanctions, basically using money as a weapon to try and punish Russia. Now, to get Russia's perspective here, you absolutely have to understand its relationship with NATO. From Moscow's point of view, watching this Western military alliance expand eastward, closer and closer to its borders since the 90s, that isn't just a political disagreement. They see it as a direct, existential threat to their country's security. And this creates a really dangerous feedback loop. Here's how it works. NATO countries send military aid to help Ukraine defend itself. Russia sees this and says, "See, we told you so, this proves they're hostile," which then causes them to escalate their own actions. It's a textbook security dilemma, but it's playing out with incredibly high stakes. And those economic weapons, the sanctions, they had a huge blast radius. I mean, look at this. They were designed to hit Russia's economy, and they certainly did. But the global economy was definitely not immune. The shockwaves from these sanctions rippled out everywhere, messing with energy prices, tangling up supply chains, and fueling inflation all over the world. So, all of this brings us to the present and the search for stability. But despite all the years of fighting and talking, a real, lasting peace has just been incredibly elusive. It's always felt just out of reach. This really gets at the central contradiction of the whole thing. On the one hand, you have diplomats sitting at tables, constantly talking, trying to find a peaceful way out of this mess. But at the exact same time, both sides are just continuing to build up their militaries, which only pushes tensions higher and higher. And that's the real gut punch. You can have all the ceasefire agreements you want written on paper, but the reality on the ground is that they're broken all the time, almost every single day. And that constant low-level fighting makes any real hope for a stable peace feel, incredibly far away. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that this has never, ever been a conflict just about two countries. It has fundamentally reshaped global alliances, it's challenged our ideas of international security, and it's created a ripple effect of instability that touches pretty much everyone. This is a crisis with truly global consequences. And that leaves us with the final, really tough question, doesn't it? When you factor in all the turbulent history, all the deeply entrenched positions of the world's superpowers, and the unbelievable human cost, it just forces you to wonder, what could a genuine path to lasting stability here even look like? That's the question the entire world is still desperately trying to answer.